Adeline Monroe had never felt fear like this. Not at a business negotiation, not at the high-stakes galas where she moved like a queen among her peers, not even when her father's failing heart had nearly taken him months before. Fear now lived in her chest as she walked down the aisle, the ivory silk of her gown brushing over the marble floor of the cathedral, echoing softly beneath her heels. Guests murmured politely behind her, their eyes bright with anticipation, oblivious to the storm she sensed, but could not yet name. Lucien Vale stood at the altar, hands clasped, posture perfect, his gaze fixed, not on the crowd, not on the priest, but on her. His presence was commanding yet oddly gentle, a paradox she could not reconcile. The air around him shimmered almost imperceptibly, as though the light itself hesitated before reaching him. It was not a trick of the chandeliers. She felt it in the marrow of her bones. He was not like anyone she had ever met. Her thoughts raced, tangled with doubt and longing. I agreed to this to save my family, to protect them. But why does my stomach feel like it's breaking in two? She had rehearsed this day 1,000 times, memorized every step, every smile, every word of polite gratitude she would utter to the gathered elite. But the rehearsals could not prepare her for the tremor in her heart when she saw him, when she felt the unnatural warmth radiating from him, the almost imperceptible pull on her soul. The priest's voice rose, solemn and steady. "Do you, Adeline Monroe, take Lucien Vale to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her throat tightened. She knew what she was saying yes to. She knew what the contract demanded. And yet, as her gaze locked with his, she realized that the cold calculations of duty had already begun to melt. Lucien's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was not the smile of a man about to gain a bride. It was the smile of a being centuries old who had seen countless agreements, countless pledges, countless promises made and broken. And for the first time, that smile carried uncertainty. This is wrong, she thought. And yet it feels right. The days leading up to the wedding had been a blur of satin, crystal, and whispered congratulations. Adeline had moved through her Manhattan penthouse like a ghost of elegance, every mirror reflecting not just her beauty, but the relentless weight of her obligations. Invitations sent, florists arranged, caterers coordinated. The world saw perfection. But she alone saw the fracture lines beneath it all. Lucien had arrived only twice before the wedding for formal introductions. Both times the air had shifted as if the city itself bowed to his presence. Conversations with him felt like walking on a frozen lake. Calm. Still. But one wrong move, and you would fall through into a bottomless abyss. And yet, no one else seemed to notice. No one else would notice. That was part of who he was. A force not meant for human eyes, not meant for mortal comprehension. During the rehearsal dinner, he had sat quietly beside her, speaking only when necessary. Yet even in silence, he seemed to communicate volumes. He noticed the tremor in her hand as she raised a glass to toast her father. He noticed the way her gaze lingered too long on her mother, the flicker of worry about the family's fading fortunes. And he, who had seen empires rise and fall, had felt a curious tug he could not name. The morning of the wedding arrived in perfect weather, a rare gift from the heavens themselves. She slipped into her gown, the silk smooth like liquid against her skin, the pearls around her neck catching the early sun. Her reflection was flawless. The bride society expected. And yet, no reflection could show the tempest brewing inside her. Lucien appeared at the threshold, his presence filling the room without effort. His eyes, dark and infinite, found hers instantly. "Are you ready?" His voice was low, calm, yet it carried a weight that made her knees tremble. She nodded, though the nod was more about courage than certainty. I think so." He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. Not human warmth. Not like any human she had ever known. But not threatening either. There was no coercion, no command, only presence. And that presence made her heart ache. As they walked to the cathedral, the city watching them from the sidelines of skyscrapers and social media feeds, Adeline felt an unnatural pull in her chest. She realized then that Lucien had already begun weaving something between them, something unspoken, intangible, yet undeniable. The cathedral was breathtaking, a cathedral of old stones and golden light, of stained glass depicting angels whose wings seemed almost alive. The elite guests had assembled like a meticulously curated audience, every smile polite, every gesture restrained. Yet, as Adeline approached the altar, she felt the space around Lucien contract. Shadows stretched, the temperature dropped slightly, and the air shimmered, as if reality itself was bending. She knew, without understanding how, that he was not human. Not in a way that could ever be explained or comprehended. And yet, she did not feel fear. She felt anticipation, and something more dangerous, a stirring of desire, of connection, that no contract could dictate. The priest asked the traditional questions. "Do you take this man to be your husband?" Her voice trembled as she replied, "I do." Lucien's hand brushed hers, just a brush. But the energy between them rippled, subtle and seismic. He whispered, barely audible, "You understand the cost?" Her breath caught. "I do." And in that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath with her. Over the following hours, the ceremony progressed with elegance, precision, and ceremony. Guests marveled at the flawless execution, the opulence of the decorations, the beauty of the bride. But behind the curtains of grandeur, a different story unfolded, a story only the two of them could feel. Lucien began to break his own rules subtly. When her bouquet slipped from her hands during a fleeting faintness of nerves, he caught it before it hit the marble floor. When the choir sang, and the vibrations threatened to unbalance her, his hand rested lightly at her back, steadying her without ever being noticed. Every touch, every motion, carefully calibrated, yet never crossing the boundary of their formal agreement. And Adeline, who had prepared herself to give everything, began to feel a strange reciprocation. She caught him watching her, not as a predator or a contract enforcer, but as a being seeing something precious, fragile, and irreplaceable. "Is it possible?" she thought. "Can something not human truly feel this?" The wedding continued. The vows were spoken. The ring slid onto her finger. And then came the moment of absolute realization. The contract had never truly been about her. It had been about him, and how he would never have known choice, affection, or love. Until now. Lucien's gaze met hers, and she saw centuries of existence reflected in his eyes. An existence spent ensuring promises were kept, contracts enforced, obligations fulfilled. And yet, for the first time in his long life, he hesitated. "Loving you," he whispered, "was never part of the deal, but losing you would destroy me." Her heart caught in her throat. The words were not human. They were too vast, too old, too real. And yet they were tender, vulnerable, intimate. The rest of the ceremony passed in a surreal blur. Guests smiled, clapped, and photographed. But none could feel what had shifted in the air, what had blossomed in the silent spaces between them. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know what you've done?" She frowned. "I saved my family?" He shook his head slightly. "No. You've awakened something in me that should not exist. Love, attachment, humanity, things I never was meant to feel." Her hand brushed his, tentative at first, then with certainty. "And is it wrong?" He exhaled, the sound barely a whisper. "Wrong? Perhaps. Dangerous? Certainly. But I cannot deny it. Not for you. Not anymore." Adeline felt tears prick at her eyes. The truth of it, the vulnerability of this immortal being admitting weakness, struck her deeper than any danger or obligation ever could. She realized then that she had not come into this marriage to receive love. She had come into it to protect, to survive, to uphold duty. But love, unexpected, untamed, had found her anyway. And Lucien had given it to her. The following days unfolded in a haze of intimacy that neither contract nor obligation could dictate. Lucien moved through their shared spaces with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, yet entirely natural. He did not demand, did not instruct, did not insist. He observed, waited, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to guide. A misplaced step while descending the grand staircase would find his hand lightly against her back, steadying her. A sudden draft in the hall would see him moving to close a window, not by command, but by instinct, to protect the fragile warmth of her presence. Adeline began to notice the subtle ways he altered his own behavior, bending rules she had never known existed. He would take the weight of a difficult guest's questions upon himself, deflecting politely, so she would not have to. He would stay awake while she slept, not to watch, not to guard in the conventional sense, but simply to ensure she was safe, that she was breathing, that she was herself. Each gesture, minute though it might seem, was a declaration of intent, and Adeline, who had prepared her entire life to give freely, slowly began to receive. She began to recognize the extraordinary in the ordinary, the immeasurable care in every small touch, every deliberate glance. She felt her heart open, despite the knowledge that his love was as dangerous as it was powerful, that it challenged the very essence of his being. It was on the 7th night after the wedding that the revelation came, quiet but profound. They had taken a walk through the gardens surrounding the Vale estate, the moonlight casting long, silvery shadows across the fountains and hedges. Lucien stopped by a reflecting pool, his gaze fixed on his own image. Though she knew it was not his own reflection he studied, but the centuries of existence mirrored in the glassy surface. "I cannot continue this," he said softly, without looking at her. "Loving you is unraveling me. I am not built to feel what you demand. Humanity is a weight I was never meant to bear." Adeline stepped closer, reaching out to touch his arm. "Then stop trying to bear it alone. Let me help you. Let me choose you." He turned then, his eyes meeting hers with a vulnerability she had never witnessed. "You don't understand," he said. "To feel what I feel for you, to truly love, is to destroy what I am. I cannot remain as I am and love you. One will break, one will remain. I do not know which it will be." Her breath caught. "I do not care what it costs you, only that we face it together." And so the moment of ultimate choice arrived. Lucien, the immortal collector of promises, dissolved the very covenant that had sustained his existence. Light swirled around him, ethereal and bright, as centuries of unbroken power unraveled. He cried out, not in anger, not in pain, but in the vast, echoing resonance of transformation. Adeline fell to her knees beside him, holding his hand as the being she had known, respected, feared, and adored, became mortal before her very eyes. The ancient glow faded from his eyes, replaced by the soft, beating life of a human heart. His breath came ragged and uneven, and for the first time, he shivered from the cold and the vulnerability of existence. She lifted his face with trembling hands, her tears mingling with the remnants of moonlight that clung to him. "It's over," she whispered. "No contracts, no promises, only us." Lucien's lips curved into a smile, raw and real. "Then, it is worth everything," he said. And for the first time in centuries, the being who had never known choice, love, or mortality felt it all: pain, warmth, fragility. And it was beautiful. As they stood together, bathed in the first light of dawn spilling over the estate, they understood the truth that no contract could ever define. Love is not an obligation, nor a payment, nor a promise. It is a choice, a surrender, a defiance of every rule, human or supernatural. And in that choice, they were equal. The days after the wedding unfolded in a strange, delicate rhythm, as if the world itself was holding its breath around them. Adeline woke each morning in the luxurious suite of the Vale estate, draped in silks and soft linens, the skyline of Manhattan painting golden stripes across the floor. Yet, luxury mattered little in comparison to the presence beside her. Lucien sat across from her, sipping his morning coffee with that same calculated precision, yet his eyes never left her. There was no coercion in his gaze, only awareness, a gentle gravity that pulled at her chest with unspoken promises. Adeline's reflection in the mirror showed a woman of perfect composure. Society would see elegance, poise, and wealth. But she saw something more vulnerable, heartstrings being tugged in directions she could neither predict nor control. She remembered the first time she had truly noticed him, not just as the supernatural groom, the collector of promises, the being she had feared and admired, but as Lucien, the way he had stayed awake beside her, silently, ensuring she slept, that she breathed. That presence, constant and quiet, had started to unravel her defenses without a word. Even in the grand halls of the estate, he moved like a shadow perfectly attuned to her needs. When her gown caught on a banister, his hand brushed hers lightly, steadying her without anyone noticing. When she shivered in the late-night chill of the balcony, he draped a silk shawl around her shoulders, his movements graceful and unspoken, almost ritualistic. And yet, the supernatural nature of Lucien never left the edges of reality. Shadows bent slightly toward him. The air shimmered when he exhaled. Lights flickered subtly when his presence was too close to power. Adeline, though terrified and fascinated, never felt fear in these moments, only a dizzying, intoxicating pull toward him. He was not human, but he cared. He chose her. And that choice, impossible and breathtaking, was more powerful than any vow she had ever given. One night, after the estate had fallen silent, Adeline found herself wandering the moonlit gardens alone. Lucien appeared beside her, as he always did, without noise, without warning, as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. "You walk too far," he said softly, though his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I need air," she admitted, her chest tight with emotions she could not yet name. He stayed close, silent, letting her draw the world around her in, but never letting her feel alone. She turned to him, searching his expression, trying to understand the immensity of what she had married. "Why do you stay?" she asked finally. "Why do you care?" Lucien's eyes held her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Because you make me feel something I was never meant to feel. I am not built for love. And yet, here I am, drawn to you in ways I cannot resist. Loving you is a risk that could undo me. And yet I cannot stop." Her hands found his, trembling as she traced the contours of centuries-old power distilled into the warmth of flesh. "Then let us risk it together," she whispered. "I choose you." For a long moment the world seemed to pause. The fountain's water rippled softly. The moonlight wrapped around them in silver, and the estate itself seemed to bend closer, as if to witness what was unfolding. And in that silence, Lucien allowed himself something dangerous. A heartbeat. Not metaphorically, not as a force of supernatural energy, but literally, as the first tremor of life, breaking through immortal restraint. Days turned into weeks, and each moment together became an exercise in discovery. Adeline noticed subtle changes in him, how his eyes softened when she spoke, how he lingered just a heartbeat longer at her side, how the world around him bent slightly in recognition of their bond. He had always been a being of rules and precision, yet now he allowed unpredictability. He laughed once, softly, at a careless joke she made. He lingered in the kitchen as she prepared a late-night tea, observing without critique, his presence a steadying comfort. He had never done these things before, not for anyone. And yet for her, he was changing, humanity threading itself slowly through the immortal, ancient fibers of his being. It was on a rainy afternoon, the city streets glistening with reflected lights, that Adeline truly realized the depth of her attachment. She had slipped on the marble of the estate's grand staircase, and Lucien had caught her effortlessly, holding her close. His warmth was a living thing, beating against her body, radiating life into every cell of her being. "You are fragile," he said softly, his breath brushing her hair. "Yet I cannot leave you, even if I must undo myself, even if love itself will destroy me." Her lips pressed to his cheek in a silent, desperate plea. "Then let me share it with you. Let me bear it with you." And there, in the quiet storm of rain and shadows, the impossible became real. A bond between human and supernatural, fragile and unstoppable, terrifying and tender all at once. The night sky stretched endlessly above the Vale estate, stars blinking like distant witnesses to a story far beyond human understanding. Adeline and Lucien stood in the moonlit garden, the silence between them charged with centuries of unspoken truths, the weight of covenants, and the fragile promise of a love that defied time itself. Lucien took a deep breath, his eyes dark and infinite, reflecting both eternity and vulnerability. "Adeline, there is no turning back," he whispered. "If I do this, if I give up what I am, I will be mortal, vulnerable, fragile. But it is the only way to truly be with you. To love you without the shadows of power and obligation clouding it." Adeline reached for him, her hands trembling but steady. "Then I accept," she said, her voice firm yet soft. "I accept you, all of you. Even if the world ends tomorrow, even if the stars themselves fall, I choose you." A subtle glow began to radiate from Lucien, faint at first, then growing, spiraling around him like silver fire. Centuries of immortal existence, of unbroken contracts and impossible obligations, began to unravel. The air hummed, the ground beneath them pulsed with energy, and for a moment, Adeline felt as though she stood at the edge of infinity itself. Lucien's body shivered, not in pain, but in the transformative agony of surrendering power that had defined him for lifetimes. His eyes, once dark and unreadable, softened into the warm hazel of mortality, and he gasped, the first human breath he had ever drawn. I feel it," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "The weight, the fragility, the heartbeat of life. It is terrifying, and beautiful, and it is yours." Adeline stepped closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. She cupped his face, feeling the warmth of humanity for the first time in her life. "It is ours," she murmured. "All of it. Every fragile, beautiful piece." The garden seemed to respond to their union. The fountains glimmered with moonlight, the flowers swayed though no wind stirred, and even the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if blessing a love that had defied the impossible. For the first time, Lucien felt the weight of mortality. Fear, hunger, fatigue, but also the exhilaration of choice, of feeling, of being truly alive. He took her hands in his, trembling slightly, yet firmly. "Adeline, I was never human. I was never meant to be. But now, I am yours. I am real. And it is more than I ever imagined." Her laughter broke through, soft and radiant, carrying with it the relief and joy of a woman who had risked everything for love. "Then we are equal," she said. "No contracts, no obligations. Just us." They kissed, slowly, deliberately, tasting the fragility and power of this new life together. In that moment, centuries of loneliness, isolation, and cold calculation melted away. Lucien's immortality was gone, but what he gained, love, choice, humanity, was worth more than eternity. The dawn began to break over the skyline, washing the garden in hues of gold and rose. Together, hand in hand, they walked back to the estate, not as bride and groom bound by supernatural laws, not as immortal and mortal divided by power, but as two souls reborn into a shared humanity. Each step was a victory over fear, obligation, and the impossible. Each breath was a celebration of choice and love, and as the city stirred to life below, oblivious to the miraculous transformation above it, Adeline and Lucien smiled at one another, knowing that their love, impossible, fragile, eternal in its own way, would endure. Not because of power, not because of contract, but because it was real, raw, and utterly theirs. For the first time, the world was wide open, and they would face it together,